This video is designed to help you relax or fall asleep. Before we begin, if you think you might fall asleep, please introduce yourself in the comments. Please also like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. As always, I'd love to know where you're watching from. So let us know in the comments and share what time it is where you are. Thank you once more for joining me. Get comfortable, grab a glass of water, make sure you've locked your door, and turn off the lights. Don't forget to say hello in the comments. It's time to close your eyes. This all started when I stumbled across a conversation about the deep web in an online gaming forum. People were swapping stories about underground auctions and secretive sites where you could score anything from rare comic books to the sort of stuff you'd rather not think about. It was like a car crash on the internet, horrible to think about, but somehow you can't help but look. Despite all the warnings, my curiosity was piqued. I had to see if the rumors were as true as they were saying. I began by hunting down how to access this hidden part of the internet. It wasn't straightforward, and I had to use special software that masked my location. The whole process felt like I was gearing up for a spy mission, except the only thing I was risking was possibly my peace of mind. My first stop was a site that was supposedly a treasure trove for collectors like me. It was surprisingly mundane at first glance, just pages of items with pictures and prices. I scrolled through sections of vintage video games and limited edition figurines, feeling a bit underwhelmed but still intrigued by the sheer volume of stuff available. That's when I started noticing the sidebar ads. They were different, darker, suggesting sites that were a few clicks too far from legal. I remember pausing, my cursor hovering over a link. My stomach told me to stop, knowing that I was about to cross a line from which I couldn't uncross, but then that whispering voice of curiosity nudged me forward. I clicked. The transition was gradual. I went from a site selling stolen artwork to another, auctioning items that seemed to come straight out of crime scenes or horror movies. I remember one particular item, a dusty, old doll, and a description that claimed it was haunted. It was creepy, sure, but then I read the comments. People weren't just buying these things, they were trading experiences and stories about them. It was a community, thriving in the shadows of the internet. The deeper I went, the heavier the air felt, like diving into deep water, pressure building against my chest. It was so exciting. One night, I found myself on a site that didn't just sell items, it offered experiences. Live feeds from cameras placed in abandoned asylums, prisons, and other places that were supposed to be haunted. The first feed I clicked on was a grainy video of an old hospital hallway. The description said to watch and listen. Sometimes you could hear the screams of past patients. I watched and I listened, and something in the pit of my stomach twisted when a distant wail filtered through my speakers. It was probably fake, but it sounded so real. Too real. That should have been enough to stop me. But it was not. I kept going back, night after night, drawn by a mix of fear and fascination. It wasn't long before the whispers started. Soft, unintelligible murmurs that would creep up when the room was too quiet, making me pause my music or video to listen closely. I'd turn around fast, half expecting someone to be right there behind me. But there was never anyone there. One particularly quiet night, as I sat trying to convince myself to stay off my computer, an email notification popped up. No subject, just a link. My first instinct was to delete it, but I was used to clicking on dangerous links at this point. I clicked on it, and a tab opened on my computer that looked like code or a script. Before I could even react and try to close the window, it was gone. I immediately knew that I'd messed up. I only ever clicked on random links while I was using the software that is supposed to protect you on the deep web. This was just an email on my normal computer, no protection, and I stupidly clicked the link thinking I was protected. Whatever this was had definitely infected my computer. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. I frantically installed the best antivirus software I could find and tried deleting anything on my computer that seemed suspicious. I spent hours on forums looking for answers. I was too scared to stay in my apartment, but too scared to leave. Feeling trapped in a nightmare of my own making. I started seeing things out of the corner of my eye. Shadows moving, lights flickering. Every noise made me jump. I was spiraling. I was a paranoid mess. As days passed, the situation only escalated. My computer became almost autonomous, sprouting new software applications that I hadn't installed. These programs would open randomly, displaying cryptic messages or just running in the background, their purposes unknown but undoubtedly sinister. I tried to remove them, but they seemed to regenerate with every reboot, each time taking a little more control away from me. The emails turned from vague threats to explicit demands. They wanted money, a substantial amount, transferred to a Bitcoin wallet within a week, or they would start leaking my personal information. With each new message, they included a snippet of data they had stolen from my computer, bank statements, private emails, photos, proof that they weren't just bluffing. I considered going to the police, but what would I say? That I'd been poking around in the digital underworld and got burned? I felt trapped, unsure of how far these people would go or what they were capable of. One morning, after a particularly sleepless night, I received a package at my doorstep. No return address, just a small, nondescript box. Inside was a cheap burner phone and a note that read, "Keep this with you. We'll call." The reality of the threat hit home. I wasn't just dealing with digital ghosts anymore, this was real and tangible. I was on edge all the time, jumping at every phone call, every notification. Then, the burner phone rang. A distorted voice on the other end instructed me to stop investigating the sites I visited on the deep web, to pay the Bitcoin, and to forget everything I'd seen. The voice warned that if I didn't comply, the consequences would reach beyond just me. It was clear they knew enough about my life to make good on that threat. I had to make a choice, and I had to make it quickly. Could I really pay these people? The amount they wanted was more than the deposit I had saved for my house. They'd seen how much I had in my bank account. They expected me to take out huge loans and detailed in the emails how I could claim I was a victim of fraud so that I wouldn't have to pay the loans back. What was to stop them from coming back for more? I realized then that I couldn't keep living in fear, jumping at shadows, waiting for the next email, the next call. I decided to leave, at least for a while, to get away from the reach of my home, the hacked devices, the constant surveillance I felt. Even if it was just paranoia, it was consuming me. I packed a bag with essentials and left the house, planning to stay at a motel out of town. But as I was leaving, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was another link, this time with a simple message. "Watch before you go." Against my better judgment, I clicked. It was a video of my own house. It was a video of me walking out. Someone was watching me in real time, and they wanted me to know it. I felt anger, and I realized that running wouldn't solve anything. They could still reach me, wherever I went. I needed help. I drove straight to the police station. I told them everything, from the deep web browsing to the emails and the video. It was out of my hands now, but the response was disheartening. They took my statements and evidence, but warned me that cybercrimes, especially those routed through the dark web, were notoriously difficult to trace and prosecute. Their resources were limited, and without immediate threats to my physical safety, they could only offer surveillance tips and monitor my case from a distance. I tried explaining to them that there must be someone literally sitting outside my house all the time watching, but they really weren't interested in investigating. Fearing for my safety and mental well-being, I decided to consult a cybersecurity expert. The expert confirmed my worst fears. My system was deeply compromised and my personal data was probably being sold on the dark web. The advice was drastic but clear. I needed to wipe all my devices, change all my passwords, and essentially start my digital life over. Even with these measures, I would likely have issues for the rest of my life and would never be able to get a loan. I followed the advice, wiping every device and securing my accounts, but the damage was done. Every email notification and every phone call brought a wave of anxiety. I started receiving small packages at my home, no return address, sometimes just a small piece of tech or a cryptic note. It was a psychological game, a way to remind me that I was being watched. One night, as I tried to salvage some semblance of normalcy, an email arrived with a link. This time, I didn't click it. Instead, I forwarded it to the cybersecurity expert. They analyzed the link in a secure environment and reported back with chilling news. It was a live feed, a video of the front of my house, timestamped just minutes before. That was the final straw. Realizing that the threats had transcended the digital realm and could potentially endanger my physical safety, I decided I couldn't stay in my home any longer. I packed a bag with essentials, secured my house as best I could, and left to stay with a friend in another city, hoping distance might offer some protection. Now, living in this temporary haven, I spend my days looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows, wondering if every stranger might be connected to the dark web ring that upended my life. The police haven't been able to make any arrests, their updates sparse and unhelpful. They tell me they're doing what they can, but their reassurances do little to mitigate my fear. Every day is a battle against the anxiety that they might find me again, that the next link sent to my email or phone won't just be a video but a real and final threat. The deep web had seemed like a distant, abstract danger, but I just had to keep digging deeper. My life is completely ruined. I don't know how I'll survive. My name is Alex. I'm a 28-year-old accountant living in Austin, Texas. About 3 years ago, while I was still settling into what I hoped would be a breezy life, my curiosity about the dark corners of the internet led me down a path I now regret stepping onto. I had heard of the deep web during my college days. I knew it was full of illegal stuff, but I had no idea just how bad things actually were. I began my journey into the deep web mostly out of boredom and a pinch of naivety. At the time, I was living alone, my days filled with work and the occasional video game during weekends. My experience with computers made me confident. I knew my way around the internet better than most, and I thought I could navigate the deep web without getting in over my head. One night, while digging through online forums about data security, I stumbled upon a thread discussing the deep web. The users talked about it as a kind of digital Wild West, a place without rules where anonymity was king. My interest was piqued. I thought, what harm could a little exploration do? I set up a VPN, downloaded the necessary browser, and jumped in. The first site I visited was relatively mundane. An online marketplace selling rare books. The interface was clunky, like websites from the early 2000s, and I scrolled through pages of old texts and manuscripts, amused that such a normal activity was considered part of the dark internet. This innocuous start made me bolder. I began visiting more sites, clicking through forums and black markets, intrigued by how vast this hidden part of the internet was. But as I went deeper, the content wasn't so innocent. It became darker. I stumbled upon a site auctioning off items that clearly shouldn't have been for sale, personal data, hacked accounts, and more sinister listings. The reality of what I was doing started to sink in. I remember pausing over a listing for a genuine haunted relic, complete with supposed proof in the form of eerie, blurred photos and testimonials from previous buyers. My rational mind told me it was all scams and theatrical flair, but a part of me couldn't help but feel inert. My descent didn't stop there. I found myself on a site that offered live videos. That night, I stumbled upon a site that was nothing like the usual fare of rare collectibles or black market tech. It streamed live surgeries being performed, not for educational purposes, but for an audience that seemed to get off on it. The first video I clicked on was a live surgery being conducted in what looked like a rundown clinic. Definitely not up to any health or safety standards I knew. The room was dimly lit, the walls stained, and the equipment outdated. A man, presumably a doctor, though he wore no identifying scrubs, was bent over a patient lying on a bare metal table. There was no anesthesia from what I could tell. The patient was unnervingly still, perhaps sedated by less conventional means. The doctor worked with a calm precision that belied the grim setting he was in, removing an organ with an unsettling nonchalance. The scene was gruesome, and yet I couldn't look away. The stream had a chat feature, and the comments rolled in. Viewers were placing bets, discussing the condition of the extracted organ, some even praising the doctor's technique. Driven by a mix of horror and intrigue, I found myself returning to the site night after night. The surgeries varied, from amputations to more invasive procedures. And with each visit, my initial disgust battled with a growing morbid curiosity. I started paying for access to specific streams that promised unprecedented surgeries, telling myself it was just curiosity, that this was just another type of extreme content readily available on the dark web. Weeks passed, and my nocturnal viewings became a habit. But then, things took a sinister turn. One evening, as I stepped out for a late-night store run, I noticed a van parked across the street from my apartment. It was nondescript, but something about it felt off. When I returned, the van was still there, and I could see figures inside, their faces obscured. A chill ran down my spine, but I brushed off the paranoia and headed inside. The next night, after watching another disturbing surgery, I heard noises outside my apartment. Peering through the blinds, I saw the same van, and this time, I could make out the figures moving towards the building's entrance. Panic set in as I realized that the interest in these streams might have attracted the wrong kind of attention, perhaps from those involved in the broadcasts. I grabbed my keys and phone and slipped out through the back door, just as I heard the front door of my building slam. I sprinted down the alley, my heart pounding in my chest. As I glanced back, I caught a glimpse of the men following me. Their accents were distinctly Brazilian, shouting to each other as they searched. I didn't stop running until I reached a more populated area, my breath ragged, my mind racing. It dawned on me just how dangerous my viewing habits could have been. The realization that I could have been their next patient if I hadn't escaped was sobering. After that night, I wiped my computer, ditched my old email accounts, and moved to a new apartment in a different part of the city. The deep web had shown me a world that was too dark, too real, and too dangerous to ever revisit. My curiosity had nearly cost me more than I could bear to think about. I learned the hard way that some things are better left unseen, and there are places in the digital world that are best avoided at all costs. Alright, so here's the whole saga of how a seemingly innocent dive into my family history turned into an absolute disaster, thanks to a sketchy dark web service. It's a bit of a journey, so buckle up. It all started when I hit a brick wall with my family tree research on those popular and expensive ancestry websites. You know the ones, They lure you in with the promise of free trials, only to clamp down with hefty fees the moment you actually want to dig deeper. Frustrated and a bit strapped for cash, I vented to a friend about how I wished I could uncover more about my heritage without going broke. That's when he half-jokingly suggested looking into alternatives on the dark web. Cheaper and deeper, he claimed. I laughed it off initially, but the seed was planted. A few nights later, fueled by curiosity and a stubborn reluctance to pay those exorbitant ancestry site fees, I started poking around online. It wasn't long before I stumbled upon a forum thread filled with people praising these underground ancestry services. They promised comprehensive family history reports without the mainstream price tag. They were a little too enthusiastic, maybe, but their stories of discovering long-lost relatives and family secrets for next to nothing were incredibly enticing. Driven by a mix of skepticism and excitement, I ventured deeper. I found a service that boasted access to exclusive databases, claiming they could trace lineage back centuries. The catch? They needed detailed personal information to ensure accuracy. Names, dates of birth, places of residence, and so on. In hindsight, the red flags were there, waving frantically. But my eagerness to learn about my family's past clouded my judgment. I filled out their form, detailing everything from my grandparents' birth dates to the small town in Ohio where my mother was born. Weeks passed without a word from the service. I had almost forgotten about it, chalking it up as a loss, when suddenly I began noticing oddities with my finances. It started small, a phone call from my credit card company about a suspicious charge that I quickly recognized as not mine. I thought it was a one-off incident, but then I received a mailer for a credit card I never applied for, followed by another, and then another. That's when the full scale of the nightmare hit me. Someone was using my personal details to open accounts left and right. The realization was like a bucket of ice water, shocking and jolting. I scrambled to check my credit reports, and the extent of the damage slowly unfolded before me. There were multiple inquiries and several new accounts, all festooned with purchases I had never made. The stress was palpable, a constant weight on my chest. Each new discovery of fraud felt like another brick added to the load I was carrying. Dealing with the aftermath was a drawn-out affair. Contacting credit bureaus became a daily routine. I spent hours on hold, waiting to speak with someone who could help me untangle the web of deceit woven with my stolen data. I filed disputes for every fraudulent charge and account, a process that was as time-consuming as it was frustrating. As I waded through the bureaucracy of reclaiming my identity, I also had to deal with the emotional toll. The feeling of vulnerability was overwhelming. My personal information, which I had handed over so naively, had been weaponized against me. The safety and security I once felt were shattered, replaced by paranoia about every email, every phone call, and every letter that arrived in the mail. After weeks of researching how to recover from identity fraud and starting to think that I corrected my mistakes, I got a call. My mom called me one evening. Her voice was shaking, explaining that someone had just demanded she pay thousands of dollars on a credit card opened in her name. The caller knew everything about her, her address, birthday, even her social security number. I felt sick to my stomach. This nightmare was my fault, all because I'd been too curious and naive about a seemingly harmless deep web service. The calls became more frequent and more aggressive. My parents were bombarded daily by different people claiming to represent creditors, all demanding money for things my parents had never purchased. It wasn't just the phone anymore. Threatening letters filled our mailbox, and then the debt collectors started showing up in person. These visits were the most terrifying part. I remember the first time one of them came to our door. He was a large man, his whole demeanor very threatening and intimidating. He insisted on entering the house to resolve the debt issue. My dad managed to keep him outside, but the implied threat was clear. He wasn't just there to talk, he was there to intimidate us into paying. Things kept getting worse. More collectors came, each more aggressive than the last. My parents' credit scores were destroyed, new fraudulent accounts popped up weekly, and fighting all this became a daily, grueling task. The strain it put on my family was immense. We were all stressed, always on edge, and I could see the disappointment and fear in my parents' eyes. They tried not to blame me, but I knew they were hurting because of what I had done. It all culminated one night when a particularly menacing group showed up claiming we owed money on a luxury car. Their threats were barely veiled, suggesting that accidents could happen if we didn't pay up. That night, we seriously discussed moving, changing our names, anything to escape this terror. But the damage was too deep. My life unraveled quickly after that. I lost my job because I couldn't focus. I was too wrapped up in dealing with our ongoing security issues and trying to salvage what was left of my family's finances and safety. My relationship with my parents deteriorated. They couldn't look at me without a mix of fear and disappointment. We were all trapped in a constant state of anxiety, jumping at every phone call, every knock at the door. Now, I'm nearly broke, almost homeless, and the bond with my family is strained to its breaking point. The weight of the disaster I brought on us is crushing. I spend my days trying to repair what I can, but some days it feels hopeless. I've ruined our lives with one foolish decision, and there's no clear way out of this mess. The dark web isn't just a place for anonymous browsing, it's a dangerous world that has bled into mine, tearing everything apart. If you're thinking of going there, just don't. One of the hottest trends on YouTube right now is ordering random mystery boxes from the deep web and opening them on camera. I don't know why I didn't realize that most of these videos are fake. They're almost all staged. I thought it was a great idea and jumped on the bandwagon to claim the YouTube stardom I desperately longed for. For those who don't know much about the deep web, it's simply a part of the internet that isn't accessible from your basic search engines like Google. You have to download an encryption program. It's not illegal to access this part of the internet, but since it is anonymous, a lot of illegal activity happens here. The possibilities are endless. I grabbed my laptop, the one I've had since I graduated in 2011, and downloaded the required programs. I prefer to use my laptop over my desktop in case of viruses. My 7-year-old laptop was a little more disposable. I went through a Bitcoin phase a few years ago when it was blowing up, so I already had a little saved. It wasn't much, roughly $632, but it was enough for what I was looking for. After the downloads were finished, I opened the browser and started my journey at the Hidden Wiki website. They provide a lot of useful links to get you started on the deep web. I scrolled through the warnings and general information and found the links I was looking for. Almost forgot, I muttered to myself as I grabbed the duct tape from my desk drawer. I cut a tiny square piece off the end and placed it over my webcam. Call me paranoid, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. I clicked on the first link and waited what seemed like forever for the page to load. It was another very plain page with a list of popular websites that you could scroll through on the side. I continued my search through the web links until I found a page dedicated to mystery boxes. I wanted to find one around $500 so people knew I meant business on my channel. I was worried about being scammed. I decided to continue my search after a quick bathroom break. When I came back, I noticed my mouse was off to the side and I couldn't see it on the screen. I wiggled it around to see if it would appear, but the web page was a similar color to the mouse cursor, so I couldn't see it. I clicked a few times to see if my mouse was working and accidentally clicked a link. I was taken to a pitch black page with small white text near the top. I'm selling one random package to anyone brave enough to receive it for only $400 or best offer. I thought to myself and decided I'll take my shot. I hit the small payment button and was asked how much I'd like to spend. I entered $300 with my fingers crossed. The payment went through without any hesitation, and I was instantly met with a chat box asking where I'd like my package sent. I know this wasn't a good idea, and I regret it to this day, but I assumed the other YouTube channels used their own addresses often, so I thought nothing of it. Without much consideration, I gave them my full name and address. I waited over a month for the box to arrive. 36 days to be exact. It came directly to my front porch. It was wrapped numerous times in tape and looked really suspicious. I set my camera on the tripod and adjusted it to show the box on a small wooden table. I draped a sheet in the background to make it look a little more professional. I collected some gloves and scissors so I could film the video in one go. Hey everybody, welcome to tonight's vlog. I continued my monologue, mentioning how I got the box and how much I paid. Without wasting further time, let's open this deep web mystery box. I grabbed the scissors and cut along the red tape. I made sure my gloves were on tight and I ripped the box open. My brow furrowed as I saw just one book. Without saying a word, I took the book out of the box. I was pretty pissed that I'd spent $300 on a book. Well, looks like we got a dud. These pages better be made of gold. The outside of the book was old and tattered, and it smelled of mildew and mold. I cracked the book open to the first page and glanced over the contents. It's an old photo album. Smells like rot. Let's look at these pictures. I showed the camera a view of the page's contents. It had 4 pictures on the first page, all labeled by days. The pictures were taken with an old Polaroid camera. There were pictures of airplanes, random suitcases, a couple of taxis, and some pretty shady motels. Looks like someone's old travel photos. I continued flipping through the pages. Every day was a different photo of nature, cars, or trains. Day 18 held the oddest photo yet. It was just a mask, handcuffs, a gag, and a bottle of some sort of drug. These people had one hell of a party, I said to the camera, trying to keep the video interesting. I zoomed in on the picture with the camera so everyone could see it. Around day 30, things started getting weird. There was a picture of a house, but not just any house. It was my parents' home. I covered my mouth with my hand as I gasped for air. How is this possible? I was unable to form a sentence. I was at a loss for words. These were undeniably personal photos. Day 33, I turned the page and there was a woman handcuffed and gagged. I immediately vomited as I saw my own mom scared and crying. And then I noticed that my dad was also in the photo, face first in a pile of what looked like black tar. Day 34, this photo was taken inside what looked like a vehicle. I focused my gaze on the dashboard where a small photo was barely visible. It was an old school photo of me. They were in my dad's truck. Day 35, another house, but this one much smaller. The photo was too blurry to make out the details. My hands were trembling and all I could hear was my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I flipped to the last page. I immediately threw the book to the ground and ran to the window. I jiggled the hatch frantically and threw it open. Without hesitation, I jumped out and ran to the neighbors. As I was running, I turned around for a brief second. What I saw haunts me to this day. A tall hooded figure stood in my room, looking at me through the window. He stood motionless before lifting his hand and waving. I screamed for my neighbor who hurried me inside and called the cops. I sat and just cried. I cried out of fear for my life. I cried for my parents. I cried because it was all my fault. My lack of common sense got my parents killed, and I will have to live with that forever. If you access the deep web, do not release any personal information. Even if people on YouTube do it. Most of it's not real. And always check your boxes. It would have saved me a lot of trouble if I had noticed it had no tracking sticker on it. It was hand-delivered. I had always been aware of the deep web. You hear the craziest, most disturbing stories from people who dare to explore it. Websites that involve human experimentation, hiring hitmen, and even watching people through their own security cameras. It's messed up. But honestly, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a bit interested. There was no malicious intent behind my exploration of the deep web. I was just curious to see if it really was as bad as people said it was. The first thing I stumbled upon was a website centered around death, which gave me a really uneasy feeling, so I didn't stay there long. It takes quite a bit to freak me out, so I was surprised that I couldn't even stomach the first website I clicked on. But it's not supposed to be all unicorns and rainbows, right? Next, I clicked on a website dedicated to watching people through security cameras. Most of the screens showed empty living rooms and patios. Some of them showed oddly decorated rooms, like one packed with stuffed animals and another eerily decorated with Christmas lights and fake Santa Claus statues. Another screen showed a young woman doing yoga, which had a lot of views. I didn't watch that one for long. Something inside me felt off. Like what I was doing was sickening. I shook my head, blinking away any more curiosity before I hovered my mouse over the tiny X to close the window. Right before I clicked, I saw a blue link under a black screen that said, "Proceed with caution." I bit down on my back teeth, internally yelling at myself to leave the page. It could be something horrible, which would make me an accomplice. What if it was someone skinning an animal or something like that? But then again, what if it wasn't? I don't know what drove me to move my mouse away from the window, hovering it over the link instead, but that's where I ended up. My curiosity always got the best of me, and no matter how twisted my stomach felt, or how strong the feeling that lingered over my head was, I had to click that link. I really just had to know what the link led to, or I would go crazy until I finally figured it out. So, I pressed my mouse down and watched the link turn purple, feeling my mouth go dry as the screen slowly loaded. The page consisted of a large screen, like the security camera page. The room was concrete and dark. There must have been a night vision camera or something, because everything had a weird green tinge, but you could tell there was little to no light. There was a dark liquid on the floor in a medium-sized puddle. I told myself it was gasoline. Don't ask me why. Movement in the far right of the screen caught my attention, and I immediately perked up in my desk chair, inching my face closer to the screen of my laptop. It looked like an arm, like someone's forearm. They were standing there, not really moving but subtly swaying, just enough to not look completely still. "Hey," I said before shaking my head and slapping my mouth shut. "Stupid." Then, the person walked over towards the left of the screen. I felt my stomach knot, felt my throat tingle and tighten, and felt bile rising in the back of my throat. I knew my mouth was open, gaping, and my eyes were wide, my face twisted in an expression of pure disgust. It was a young woman. She couldn't be older than 25 or so. Long, dark, and dirty hair was in tangles, like she'd been pulling at it. Her leg was dragging, her other skinny leg doing most of the work as she limped around. Suddenly, the woman raised her head, and it looked like it weighed a ton on her tiny body. I hadn't noticed it before, only able to barely make out her side profile, but now it was clear as day. She looked around, eyes watering with tears and black makeup streaming down her face. Small strands of bloody thread were intertwined in her lips, messily tied, locking them together. Dark blood stained her chin, probably from where she tried desperately to open her mouth, to scream. Her dainty fingers were stained as well, the same color as the puddle on the concrete. My whole body felt weak. My stomach was sick. I tried to tell myself it was fake, that it was all a big hoax. My eyes scanned to the bottom left of the screen. 5,623 people were watching. Unable to fight it any longer, I ran straight into the bathroom, puking my insides into the toilet bowl. Everything in me felt disgusting. Twisted. Once I was finally done, I laid on the floor of the bathroom, letting the cold towels try to soothe my burning body. My head was spinning. I kept repeating to myself that I shouldn't have clicked the link, I should have left, I should have closed the window and told my inner curiosity to go away. Instead, I was lying on the floor, with the bathroom reeking of vomit, and my mind a complete mess over what the hell I just watched. Should I get the link and send it to the police? My first instinct was to copy the link, just in case, then call the police and inform them of what was happening. Maybe they could trace the IP address or something. Maybe they would recognize the girl and know where to start looking. Maybe I could save her life. I'd feel really dumb if this was all fake just to get viewers, but I wasn't about to gamble. Not with what was at stake. I tried to ignore the dizzy feeling that was flooding my head as I started to pace around my room. My phone suddenly buzzed in my pocket, scaring the living daylights out of me. I stopped mid-panic and picked it up with shaky hands. I saw my girlfriend's name and immediately answered. My voice was a complete wreck, my eyes finding the screen where the girl shrunk down to the ground, the sound of her cries bouncing around the room, making my body feel rigid. I had nothing left to throw up, but I still felt so sick. Madeline, you're not going to believe what I just saw. What? Are you okay? Have you been crying? I'm not okay, I answered, averting my eyes from the screen. I know you said to stay away from the deep web, but... Are you kidding me? Her voice went from caring to mad in a split second. I told you to stay away from that place. You never listened to me. There's a girl, I said. She's trapped in some basement or something. Her mouth is sewn shut. There's blood all over her face and hands. I don't know what to do, Madeline. The woman's cries got louder and more desperate, but muffled. I'm so sorry. Close it out, clear your history, and never go back there again. I'm not kidding. But, should I call? No. Her voice was stern. You don't know if it's real. It's probably staged to get attention. Apparently idiots click on things like that. People do it all the time. That's why I said it'd be best if you just stayed away from there. You could get yourself into a lot of trouble. I didn't say anything, wordlessly walking over to the desk. My hands shook as I moved the mouse to the small X once more. My eyes watched the number of viewers slowly tick higher before I closed the window. I felt even worse than before. We can file a report tomorrow, but go to sleep and stay away from the deep web. I can't believe you even went there in the first place. I didn't have the energy to argue with her. Guilt plagued my whole body. It was all I could feel. I told her good night, that I was sorry and that I loved her before I made my way to the couch to sleep. It didn't feel right being in my bedroom or anywhere near my computer. Not while that girl was still trapped, unable to scream for help, unable to talk at all. I know it could be fake, but was that really a risk I was willing to take? I looked up some Google searches about what was fake on those kind of websites and read multiple stories about staged webcam videos, which made me feel a little bit better. but it didn't make the guilty feeling go away. It's safe to say that I didn't get much sleep. Every time I closed my eyes or even began to drift off, I would see the woman's face, the thread laced into her lips, the blood staining her mouth, her fingers, the floor. I continued to grow more and more anxious and uneasy, deciding that maybe getting out of the house, heading over to the local CVS and picking up some melatonin might help. I threw my blanket off, slid on my shoes, and grabbed my keys and wallet from the nightstand. I ended up buying melatonin and a stronger sleeping pill just in case it didn't work. I also got a pack of bottled water to rehydrate after vomiting earlier. By the time I got home, I felt much better, which lasted about 3 seconds before I noticed that my front door was wide open. I may have been in a state of shock and panic, but I never ever leave my front door open or even unlocked. The cold air felt amazing and did wonders to calm the whirlwind of thoughts in my head. I went to check the time, realizing I'd left my phone at home. Not a huge deal, the store was only a few minutes away from my house. My heart immediately began to thud against my chest. I got out of my car, closing the door quietly and unlocking my trunk, grabbing the crowbar that I kept in there. I yelled into the house, waiting for any noise. "Who is there?" My own voice was shaking and weak. I was met with complete silence. Keeping the crowbar up and ready to strike, I walked to the couch and felt for my phone. As soon as I found it, I hit the emergency button and waited until I got a hold of a 911 operator, letting her know that I thought my house had just been broken into. She told me police would be on their way. After checking around the house for anything out of place, I decided to give my girlfriend a call, letting her know what had happened. The phone rang and just kept ringing. After getting her voicemail, I hung up, knowing she'd probably be asleep this late at night. I waited about 20 or so minutes for the police to show up and walked around with them like a scared puppy as they checked every room. They ended up just having me fill out a report, telling me they'd keep patrol cars in the area just in case anyone else got hit. As they were leaving, I checked to see if Madeline had called back yet, but there weren't any missed calls. However, I did notice several outgoing calls to her cell phone. Outgoing call to Madeline, 3:12 a.m. There were multiple outgoing calls to her, almost every 2 minutes. They stopped at 3:56 a.m., which was around the time I'd gotten home. My mind went into automatic panic, knowing for a fact that I did not make those calls. I quickly checked my texts, reading what I'd apparently sent out at 3:23 a.m. "Hey, can't sleep. Gonna come over. Mind leaving the back door unlocked so I can get in?" I did not send that message. My stomach dropped, my heart thudded loudly in my chest as I noticed her reply directly underneath. "Sorry, I was sleeping. Thanks for waking me up, by the way. Lose your key again? It's unlocked, don't be too late." Without a second thought, I jumped up, running to lock all the doors and windows in my house, keeping the crowbar tight in my hand as I ran to my car. I drove as fast as my little Civic would allow, all the way to her house, ignoring any stoplights. It only took me 3 minutes to get there, but I still knew it'd be too late. I made my way to her back door, feeling every cell in my body burn when I saw it was wide open. My face was hot, my hands were shaking, but I stepped in, crowbar raised like a bat, ready to swing. I tried to keep my emotions at bay as I looked around her dark house. "Madeline?" I called out. "Are you okay?" Nothing. Silence. "Madeline?" A small scream came from her bedroom just up the stairs. My legs jerked to a run as I flew up the stairs, slamming her door open. I looked at her empty bed, her empty room. Confused, I heard the scream again. Only this time, I heard it coming through her computer monitor. I felt numb as I looked at the screen, noticing the same website I saw earlier. This time there were two women. The first woman was lying on the floor, not moving, in that puddle of dark liquid. I recognized the second girl, just as I had recognized her voice. My heart shattered as I saw her face, streaked in blood, the same threading sewn into her eyelids, locking them shut. Her scream hit my bones, surrounded my body. It was all I could hear. Her face was twisted in pure terror. I cried pathetically as her voice began to go out, continuing to grow weaker and more rasped. I locked my jaw, picking up my cell and dialing the cops for the second time, only this time it barely rang once before the deep, gravelly voice of another man answered. "You should not have called." Chills shot down my body, and I heard the phone thud as it hit the carpeted floor. My breath hitched in my throat as I bent to pick it up, hanging up the call and racing down the stairs. How did he do that? How did he redirect my call away from the police? I felt my heart race as I darted out of her back door, in a frenzy as I sprinted to the closest house. I pounded on the door, screaming at the top of my lungs until the neighbor opened it, her face tired, confused, and scared. She let me in, and I explained through frantic tears what had happened. I'm typing this on my phone to post as we both try to get a hold of the cops, but neither of our calls are going through, and neither is her landline. I think someone is messing with our cellular signal, and they may have cut our phone line, but we're going to keep trying. I don't know what's going to happen to me. If you don't hear from me again, please take this advice and this experience to heart. Stay away from the deep web. I've always had a morbid sense of curiosity. That's not something I'm particularly proud of. I've always just chalked it up to teenage curiosity. To be honest, it probably started back in middle school when people thought it was fun to send around horrible videos of executions and videos like 2 Girls 1 Cup. Just mentioning it makes me feel old. These days, there's an overabundance of these sites. Places to watch people die, blurry videos of car crashes, beheadings, and animal abuse. Of course, it's not something I actively seek out, but when I stumble across it, I feel compelled to watch, to prove to myself that nothing can affect me. For the truly gruesome stuff, one needs to visit the so-called dark web. As someone who has fallen far behind in the advancement of technology, it absolutely baffled me that only a tiny fragment of the internet is available through a Google search. The rest, which makes up approximately 99.9%, is hidden and requires a special browser to access. With the help of a YouTube tutorial, I quickly downloaded the Tor browser and went on my way to search for the hidden aspects of the internet. It couldn't have taken more than half an hour of clicking on links before I stumbled across something that quenched my thirst for the horrible forever. The website itself was rather plain. Just a black background with a video player in its center and a chat box beneath. Within a few seconds of entering the website, the video had loaded and automatically started playing. What was depicted before me was a scrawny-looking man in his early 20s, strapped to a chair and covered in wounds. In the upper left corner of the video, a timer was counting up each second. 24 minutes and 14 seconds. "Please, stop. Please, it was an accident, I swear," he yelled. A larger man entered the picture, holding a large needle connected to an empty syringe. Without speaking a word, he stuck the needle as far as it could go into the victim's abdomen. The victim let out a loud scream as the man removed the needle and plunged it back in. After a few stabs, the man grabbed a hammer and hit the victim straight in the jaw, shattering his mandible and leaving him unable to form any coherent speech. The victim let out a gurgled whimper before passing out. I tried to fast forward the video, sure it had to be fake, but that's when I realized it wasn't pre-recorded footage but a live stream. 26 minutes and 12 seconds, were the words that lit up the screen. The chat beneath the video went wild, calling out the victim as a pathetic excuse of a human being, demanding that the man continue the torture. A few seconds passed, and the chat was replaced by a voting form containing only 2 options: life or death. The votes were quickly counting, the bar for death rising rapidly. As much as I could stomach, I couldn't be part of an act of murder, so I quickly voted for life. In the end, the results were displayed on the screen. Out of 200 people, the results were 95% for death, 4% for life, and 1% did not vote. 10 people had tried to save the poor kid, but it wasn't enough. Without further warning, the man grabbed the hammer and started repeatedly hitting him, starting from the legs and working his way up until all that remained was a bloody pile of broken flesh. I sat speechless, staring helplessly at the screen as I noticed that my camera light had lit up. The video player vanished, and in its place, 10 smaller boxes popped up, all displaying people from various places around the world, all being unknowingly filmed by their own webcams. To my absolute horror, one of the boxes showed my bedroom and myself wearing a terrified expression. It quickly dawned on me that these were the people who voted to save the poor kid. Who will be next? A message appeared as a timer counted down towards 0. A few boxes turned black, to which the chat responded with laughter, a hopeless attempt at escape. 3, 2, 1. 9 of the 10 pictures disappeared from the screen, including my own, leaving the screen occupied by a middle-aged Asian man, frozen in fear. We'll see you soon. Good luck. I let out a sigh of both relief and panic. I'd escaped unharmed, but not everyone was that lucky. Of course, I called the police, but by the time they could even look into it, the link had long since expired. I don't know what else I could have done, but it taught me not to look too deep into the depths of the dark web. This is my last resort. I need help. A couple of weeks ago, I swallowed a tapeworm I bought illegally because I wanted to lose weight, but now I think I am having some negative side effects. The whole thing started when my family bought tickets for a cruise to the Caribbean. I have always been overweight, it runs in the family. I'm 19 years old, 5 feet 6 inches, female, and I weigh 200 pounds. I was scrolling through some weight loss websites when an advertisement popped up on the side of an article. Lose the weight without the effort. Normally, I wouldn't fall for clickbait, but I was desperate. The cruise was in a month and a half, and I had 90 pounds to lose. So I clicked it. It took me to the dark web, which I didn't know was possible by just clicking on an ad. But it ended up being really cheap and really easy. They basically sent me 2 things, a little jar with the worm inside, and directions for taking it, which were oddly specific. I had to swallow the worm after eating raw meat, preferably red. It had to be taken between the hours of 9 and 11 p.m., and all the lights had to be off. The worm would pass once my appetite curbed, and I had adjusted to my new lifestyle. I figured maybe these things had an effect on the tapeworm's behavior, so I thought nothing of it at the time. I forced myself to choke down an uncooked hamburger, then swallowed the worm shortly after 9:30 in pure darkness. The first week went by, and nothing happened. No weight had been lost, and I had 0 side effects that the directions warned me of. No nausea, abdominal pain, strange cravings, or feelings of hunger. I was starting to think that I had passed the worm or it had died. Whatever had happened, I was upset. The week following, however, was completely different. I woke up that Sunday morning starving. I ate all the bacon my mom had made, including 3 eggs, and the 2 she made for my 5-year-old sister, Maria, after she complained of not being hungry. I spent almost the entire day eating and never felt completely full. That night I stepped on the scale and was pleasantly surprised to find that I had lost 8 pounds. The next few days followed the same routine. Eat everything in sight and still lose weight. My diet did change, which was another side effect. I craved all the protein I could get. I was constantly finding myself in drive-thrus, ordering at least 6 hamburgers and inhaling them with no effort whatsoever. But then, the stomach pain started. I couldn't hold down anything but meat. But I had gotten down to 120 pounds. Who was I to start questioning the process now? My breakfast, lunch, and dinner consisted of nothing but ham and plain cooked hamburger. A few days later, even those meats would not satisfy the worm in my stomach. Raw meat became its meal of choice. It's disgusting. That's what I thought at first. But I've come around to it since. My mom has wondered why I no longer eat the food she makes. I keep telling her that all the weight I lost means I don't have the same appetite. Which is true, to a point. None of this is the reason I am telling this story. The reason I am writing this is because of a conversation I had after my mom left the room. Maria was sitting at the table eating chicken nuggets with ketchup, happily humming to herself while Mom and I talked. But once it was just me and her, she stopped eating and looked at me. "What's wrong with you, Angie?" I smiled softly. For her age, she was so mature and caring. "Nothing, Maria. I am on a diet. I'm getting healthier, so I'm not as hungry as I used to be." She frowned and widened her big eyes at me. "But I watched you. The other night you pulled raw bacon out of the fridge and you ate it all." I knelt beside her to comfort her, which is why I smelled her. She was sweet, so small and plump. The pains in my stomach grew stronger, and I felt the roof of my mouth start to salivate. I even got a little dizzy. I was just so hungry. I looked at her little arm resting on the table, and I could practically hear all of her fresh blood running through her veins. I blinked rapidly a few times and stumbled away from my little sister and into my bedroom. I stayed there the rest of the night. That was 3 days ago. I'm down to 99 pounds. I can smell my family from my room. I snuck out last night and tried eating some uncooked hamburger, but I threw it all up. I'm so tired. I haven't slept much lately because my dreams have all been the same. I am looking down at myself. I'm at the dinner table with a full belly and a smile spread across my lips. I can't see what I'm eating, but I can taste it. Rare, bloody, tender, and so savory. It's heaven, nothing I've ever had before. Then I slowly look over to the table, and there she is. Unmoving, but certainly alive. I'm looking at Maria, she's looking back at me. She is splayed out for me like a display, teeth marks and full bites taken out of her chunky little thighs and arms. A part of her cheek is missing, and through the bloody mess, she is silent, smiling at me with those eyes. I smile back at her, and with pieces of bloodied flesh dangling from my teeth, I swallow and lean down to take another bite of my sister. That's when I wake up, crying and starving. I would go to the doctor, but I'm terrified of being out in public. There's so many tasty people out there. I can't even track down the website where I ordered it. I think I'm running out of time. I weighed in at 90 pounds 2 hours ago. I can feel the urges growing, pushing me to feed. I'm starting to really worry that my sister might not have much time left. I used to work on the dark web. I won't get into how I came into this line of work. My job simply consisted of tracking down people I was paid to find, kidnapping them, and bringing them to a specific location. I never concerned myself with what would happen to those people afterwards, but from what I understood, they'd usually be put into the slave trade or held for ransom. After years of doing this kind of work, I eventually became desensitized to it. To me, it was just another day at the office. The only difference was that this paid much better. I should also point out that I didn't work alone. I had a partner that helped me. For the sake of this story, I'll call him Sam. Sam and I met through the dark web forums about 3 months after I started my work. He was much more experienced in kidnapping people from the dark web than me, having done it for several years. But as he was getting older, he realized the job was too difficult to do on his own anymore. After talking for a while, we eventually agreed to work together. I would help him perform the tasks that were more difficult for him to do due to his age, and he would guide me along, as well as bring me along on more difficult, higher-paying jobs to reduce the risk of me screwing them up. After meeting, we quickly realized we were a good match. It only took a few weeks to get into a groove. We'd be contacted by our employers via the forums, given a target, as well as any other important information that would be crucial for the task. Sam and I would then drive his van to the location to scope it out. We'd spend whatever time we had getting any information our employer left out, such as schedules and patterns. Then, we would decide on a date, time, and location, then secure our target and bring them to a specified drop point given to us by our employer. We'd be paid, then move on to the next job. We did our job like clockwork. As horrible of a job as it was, we were really good at it. We eventually got to the point where we could secure a target within a matter of days. We soon were able to live comfortably. Of course, we weren't stupid enough to grow complacent. After all, the dark web is a dangerous place for anyone who isn't careful. We were living smoothly, not really caring about the people we were hurting to do so. All we cared about was our fat wallets and nice homes. But then one day, everything came crashing down around us. Sam and I had been sent a job by an unnamed employer. They had instructed us to secure a 19-year-old male who lived in a wealthy neighborhood. This wasn't very abnormal for us. Plenty of previous employers sent us to secure wealthy targets, usually to ransom off. What was abnormal was a set of instructions they had given us. They told us that the target had no security system in his home, but we were not to take this for granted. We were to practice extreme caution and vigilance when securing the target, and we were to consider him extremely dangerous. Finally, the strangest instruction they gave us was that we were to administer carfentanil or a similar drug via tranquilizer darts before securing. It wasn't the fact that our employer wanted us to tranquilize our target that was strange. We had done it to plenty of previous targets before. What was strange was that they specifically requested we use carfentanil. That was the type of tranquilizer they used on elephants. Even a single dart of this stuff would be enough to kill a human. Let me make it clear that we were not hitmen. Sam and I have never killed anyone in our lives, before or after taking on this line of work. We knew there was no way we could use this stuff to take our target alive. We just assumed our employer didn't really know much about tranquilizers and just wanted to sound smart by including a specific kind. I really wish we had just listened to their instructions. We started studying our target the day after we received our instructions. The boy was a recluse to say the least. From what we could tell, he lived in his parents' house, and they were almost never home. He spent pretty much every day inside, doing whatever he wanted to pass the time. Reading, playing video games, typical teenager stuff. For the life of us, Sam and I couldn't find a single reason to consider this kid intimidating, let alone dangerous. He seemed to live an extremely sheltered life and had more than likely never had a fight before. But we had a job, and we had to follow the rules we were given. On the night we went to extract, we parked our van just outside the kid's home. Nobody else in the neighborhood was awake, so it would be relatively simple to pull him out once we got him. Sam sat up front, while I laid in the back of the van, aiming the tranquilizer rifle through the back doors. The way the van was parked gave me a perfect vantage point to the guy's house. Also, in case you're wondering, I wasn't using carfentanil, opting to use a weaker drug that wouldn't kill a human being. I wasn't concerned about our employer being upset their instructions weren't followed exactly. Unless they were planning on testing the kid's blood when they got him, there wasn't any way they would know. After 30 minutes of waiting, the kid appeared in the kitchen window. We weren't too far away, so the amount of detail I could see through was very high. He had a mop of wavy blonde hair, a splash of freckles on his nose and cheeks, and piercing emerald green eyes. He was pouring himself a glass of water when I tagged him. His reaction was surprisingly tame. He jumped from surprise as the dart entered his neck, but he didn't scream. When he pulled it out, he didn't look scared or confused. If anything, he only looked annoyed, as if he had just swatted a mosquito that had landed on him. Then he turned his head and looked right at me. I had been doing this job for about 4 years at this point, and I had seen some freaky shit. Sure, most of it was when I was browsing the dark web, but nevertheless, there was almost nothing that scared me. The look this kid gave me freaked me out. It's hard to describe exactly what his expression was as his eyes burned into me, but the best way I could describe it was an expression that said, "I dare you to come for me. You won't like what'll happen if you do." After that, the kid turned off the kitchen light and walked out of view. The van shook as Sam opened the door and hopped out, walking around to me. He had a body bag in one hand and a flashlight in the other. "All right, partner, you ready to do this?" he said calmly. I don't know if he saw the kid's expression or not, but if he did, he wasn't showing it. Yeah, let's go," I said, packing away the rifle and grabbing my own flashlight. "Christ, this is a nice house," Sam said absent-mindedly. "This is one lucky kid. I know it's not what we normally do, but maybe we could rob the place while we're here." I didn't respond as we walked towards the house. I picked the lock to the back door, and we stepped in quietly. All the lights were off, and the place was dead silent. First, we went to the kitchen. We both knew the kid probably wouldn't be there. Tranquilizers take a while to kick in, and if he had walked away after getting tagged, he'd probably be somewhere else in the house. We were right. The kitchen was empty, without any dishes or food on the counters, save for the half-full glass of water. We continued searching the house, but it became quickly apparent that something was wrong. No matter how hard we looked, we couldn't find the kid anywhere. He should have fallen unconscious by now, the tranquilizer having long since taken effect. But he was nowhere to be seen. "Are you sure you hit him?" Sam hissed at me after several minutes of fruitless searching. "I swear if you screw up this job because of crappy aim, I'm gonna kill you." "I know I hit him," I snapped. "I even saw him pull the dart out. He couldn't have gotten far, not with that tranquilizer in him." Our argument was cut short by a noise coming from the other side of the house. It sounded like multiple thuds in quick succession, like someone was loudly stomping around. The noise continued for a minute, moving around the house, before finally stopping. Sam and I quickly split up to investigate. We weren't sure about where the noise was coming from, and we didn't want to risk our target getting away. I walked back through the kitchen to the living room. I was about to move on to the next room when something caught my eye. On the floor was a pile of fabric. When I looked closer, I found that it was a pile of clothes. I recognized it as the clothes the kid was wearing. By the looks of it, he had stripped completely and left his clothes here. I had no idea why he did this. Stripping naked didn't really give you a tactical advantage when trying to escape a kidnapping, At least, not one that I could think of. Taking off your shoes could make your footsteps quieter, but taking off all your clothes wasn't really necessary. I was trying to think of a good reason for the kid stripping when my thoughts were interrupted by a blood-curdling scream coming from the other end of the house. I instantly recognized the voice as Sam's. I ran as fast as I could to where the scream came from. When I got there, Sam was laying on the ground in the hallway. From where I was standing, I couldn't see any more than his upper torso, arms, and head. He was clinging to the wall for dear life, while something in the hallway that I couldn't see pulled and wrenched at his legs. Whatever it was strong and determined to pull Sam loose. I bolted forward, desperately trying to help my partner get free. I didn't even make it halfway before Sam lost his grip and was pulled out of sight. He was screaming and crying, begging me to save him. When I rounded the corner, whatever had him was pulling him through the basement door. I only saw Sam for a split second before he was pulled down the stairs to the basement. I ran to the door, flicking the light switch on. Nothing happened. Someone had shut off the power to the house. I was caught between praying that this thing was alone and praying that it wasn't. If it was alone, that meant that we wouldn't have to deal with anybody or anything else. But that would also mean that it was smart enough to know to shut off the power in order to get the upper hand. I was shaken from my thoughts by the realization that Sam had stopped screaming. I seriously considered making a break for it and leaving him behind. It was easy to assume he was dead. But even horrible people can make friends, and as much as I wanted to deny it, I had formed a bond with Sam over the years working with him. I couldn't bring myself to leave him behind. So, scolding myself for being stupid, I made my way down the stairs. When I got to the bottom, I expected the basement to be silent. Instead, I heard a distinct crunching noise coming from the other end of the room. I tried to discern what the noise was by sound alone, but the adrenaline pumping through me made it hard to focus. With trembling hands, I clicked on my flashlight and aimed it towards the noise. I spent every day wishing I had never done that. A gangly creature was hanging from an exposed bar from the ceiling of the basement. It appeared human, but only barely. Its arms were too long, with nails like claws. Its legs and feet had too many joints, which allowed it to hang upside down from the ceiling like a bat. It seemed to have skin that didn't fit its own skeleton, with some areas being stretched thin while others were bunched up. As for the crunching noise, I found out quickly where it came from. Sam was hanging from the creature's grip. He was clearly dead, with large chunks of his flesh missing. Every few moments, the creature would pull Sam's body up towards its mouth and take a large bite out of him, tearing the flesh away and chewing loudly. It didn't seem to be picky either. It ate whatever part its mouth found, including bone. Once it realized it had a flashlight trained on it, it stopped eating Sam's corpse and looked up at me. Its face was a bloody mess. The features of its face were twisted horribly. Its jaw was so wide open, I thought it was disconnected from its skull, and its eyes lacked any sense of humanity. This thing was a monster, and I knew it would kill me without hesitation if it got the chance. I was frozen by fear, staring at this thing, when recognition suddenly struck me. The monster had horrifying features, but the blonde hair, freckles, and green eyes made everything fall into place. This thing was our target. It was the kid we had been sent here to capture. His features may have been mangled and warped, but there was no denying that this monstrosity was the kid. I understood why the tranquilizer didn't work, and why our employer instructed us to use the drugs they wanted. Why they would want this thing alive is beyond me. I would sleep much better at night if I knew this thing was in a deep grave. After what seemed like hours of staring at each other, the monster screeched at me. That was enough to send me sprinting up the stairs. I didn't stop running, didn't turn around to see if the thing was chasing me. I kept running until I got to the van, jumped in the driver's seat, and peeled off into the street. I went several miles over the speed limit, but I didn't care. I wouldn't feel safe until I was miles away from that beast. After skipping town, I emptied my savings accounts and liquidized everything I owned. After that, I went through an extensive process to erase any lingering trails. I changed my name, underwent plastic surgery, and whatever little presence I had on the web I thoroughly scrubbed clean. Any evidence of the man I was before was completely gone by the time I finished. As far as anyone was concerned, I never existed until 2 months ago. I had made a promise to myself never to bring up what I saw, to bury the past as deep as it would go. But I have been plagued by nightmares ever since seeing that monster, and I thought that maybe if I warned the world of its existence, my conscience might be alleviated. I can't go into detail about where this beast is located. It's better for everyone if that is kept a secret. As for whoever it was that wanted to capture the beast, I haven't heard from them since. In all honesty, I'm actually glad we didn't succeed in capturing it. I don't want to find out what their plans for the monster were when they got it. So, take this as a warning. People say that the dark web is full of monsters. I learned the hard way that sometimes that could be taken literally. It all started on a sunny day in college. I had just finished my last class and was excited to get back to my dorm room. Once I arrived back in my dorm, I quickly got on my computer. I was anxious to see what new websites awaited me. A while back, my brother had sort of joined me up to a dark web mailing list where people would send me interesting sites they found. He was a complete computer genius. From software encoding to Photoshop and video making, he was a wizard with all of it. One day I received a message from an unknown user. It said, "Chat to real people from the past." I thought it could be fun, so I clicked on it. The web page loaded, and there was nothing on the screen besides a chat box and a button to search for a new person to talk to. I clicked on the button to find a new person to chat with, and it took some time, but eventually I connected with somebody. There was no text or anything. Then, all of a sudden, I received a message. It read, "Dear friend, I am writing this internet mail to anyone who cares to read it. I am soon to be a father to twins. I hope this mail reaches you in good condition. We're off to see the new Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, at the theater to celebrate." New Star Wars. That movie was over 30 years old at this point. This had to be some kind of lame joke, I thought to myself. There was no way a guy in the 1980s was communicating with me. I decided to play along and thought it was all in good fun. "Yeah, I wouldn't call that movie new. I watched that when I was a kid." He replied saying, "What are you talking about? The opening night is tonight. You must be thinking of a different movie, unless you live abroad and it came out early there." "No. I'm a college kid in America," I replied. I went on to list every Star Wars movie and TV show that exists since then. "I think you have a very strong imagination," the guy replied. He wrote a long message telling me that they only have plans for a certain amount of movies and that he knows his stuff. He reminded me of my dad. He was a major Star Wars fan. I was fully indulged with the time travel role play and told him that I knew a massive spoiler for The Empire Strikes Back. I was respectful enough to ask him if he wanted to hear it, and he confidently replied, challenging me to spoil it for him. "If you've seen the movie, you know which one I'm talking about." He laughed and told me that's impossible, and mentioned that he was heading off to the theater. He stopped replying at this point, so I assumed that the fun little role play was over. It was quite wholesome, and the guy really played the part well, speaking like someone who'd only just figured out what email was and with a polite tone throughout. I went about my day, probably studied a bit less than I should have, and had a small chat with my brother. I told him about the guy from the 80s and he laughed and told me he'll have to check that website out. He was much more nerdy and he was really into all that stuff. He was a bit on the antisocial side, so the dark web was his happy place. Hours later, I heard a ding. I'd left the website open without noticing. The 80s guy had actually replied. He was going crazy, asking me how I knew about the big spoiler, and speculating that I must have had early access or worked on the film. We had a further back and forth about how I lived in 2023, and I really played into the part about being in the future, teasing him about the technology we have here. Part of me enjoyed the role play, even though that usually wasn't my thing. He asked for my name, but I was smart enough not to give someone on the dark web any details about myself. So I asked what he was called, and I felt my stomach twist when he told me. Alfie Rogers. This was suddenly not a very fun conversation. That was my dad's name. This person obviously had information on me. They must have pinged my IP address, found out my name, and did some basic background research on Ancestry.com and all those other websites that exist nowadays. Alright, you know my dad's name, this isn't funny. What do you want? I asked him, knowing that this kind of thing usually turns into a blackmail attempt or a twisted game. What do you mean? He replied, still deep in the role play. There's no way that you just pulled out a random name and it happened to be my dad's name, so you know who I am. What do you want? Even as I called him out, he still didn't budge. He confidently asserted that he was called Alfie Rogers and that he was living in the 1980s. He started to list a bunch of personal details to prove he was a real person. He knew where my dad was born, where his parents came from, my mother's name, her parents, the car he had, everything. It was really disturbing. I'm pretty good with computers, so I know just how much information you can get from historical online records, but this was impressively creepy. Whoever it was, they were really good at this and they must have planned this for some time. I thought about a question I could ask him, something only my dad could really answer. I found the perfect question. We had an old dog while I was a kid, and unfortunately we had no photos of her. Nobody else would know about this dog. There's absolutely no way it was on any database. So I asked him, who's Poppy? Poppy. That's my dog. How did you know the name of my dog? She's a border collie. She's sat with me right now. That's creepy. How did you do that? I started freaking out. I don't believe in stuff like this, in time travel or having conversations with the past, but whoever this man was had too much information about my family history. It just didn't make sense. He answered every question I threw at him. I think I spent hours quizzing him on his entire life and eventually accepting that whoever or whatever this person was, I felt like I was talking to my dad when he was my age. I'd settle past the discomfort, enjoying every moment of this conversation. Though I did ask one thing from him. If he really did exist in the past, and he really was my dad, then I wanted him to take some pictures of Poppy. He laughed and told me he'd get right on it. He told me he had to get going, and that he loves how clever computers are. I don't think he fully grasped the situation, but he happily played along as if he was talking to his real son. I asked him to tell Poppy I miss her, and even though I highly suspected that this was some strange AI or a wholesome role player, I told him I loved him. Funnily enough, he replied saying that he loved me, and finished with, "Can't wait to meet you." Then we ended the conversation. A few weeks passed. I truly felt the happiest that I'd been in a long time. It had been hard living without a dad. He had a heart attack a year before I left for college. But that conversation really gave me a feeling of closure. I felt like I'd navigated my grief and allowed myself to start healing. I'd occasionally check back on that website but never saw anything from him. I suppose it was a one-off thing. Over the next few months, I started to think about that conversation less and really started to live my life again. It was Christmas time, and I went back home to visit family. It was the second Christmas without him, and the lack of his presence was still heavily evident, but we enjoyed the holiday and I enjoyed seeing my mom and my brother. On the last night before I returned to college, my mom remembered that she had something for me. She brought me an old VHS. It was Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back. I knew what a VHS was, but they'd been extinct for about 20 years, so I wasn't sure why she was giving it to me. "Open it," she said. I pried open the clunky case and looked inside. Well, shit. There was a whole collection of photos of Poppy, dozens of them. Posing with the whole family, including me and my brother when we were just babies. There were some photos of my dad posing with the dog too. It was surreal, and I was too emotional to think about how these had come to be. There was a note attached. "For my brilliant children, may the force be with you." He was always a bit of a dork. My mom said to me, "I thought we didn't have any photos of Poppy. I don't even remember your dad taking these." A glimpse of happiness and nostalgia was noticeable in her voice. "But your brother found them a few weeks ago." I gave her a big hug and went to find my brother. I told him how great it was that he found them and started to look through them. I told him all about the website and the man from the past who claimed to be my dad, and that we even had a conversation about him taking photos of the dog. He was happy to listen and go through the photos with me, but he was his usual quiet self and didn't have much to say other than a few positive comments on the photos. He hadn't been the same since he passed. But it was nice to see him with a smile for the first time in a while. So that's my story about my time-traveling conversation with my dad. Sometimes it completely freaks me out, and I stay up all night thinking about it. Other times, I just feel comfortable knowing that something beyond my comprehension happened to me. Whether it was an incredibly talented hacker or a crazy AI, I don't know. But I tend to avoid the dark web now. I think I got lucky with this encounter. It was only a matter of time before I met someone who would use that information for the wrong reasons. Okay, so before I start, this was many years ago and I don't do this kind of thing anymore. I was young and naive and I wanted to impress a girl I liked. For legal reasons, this whole story is completely made up. I was in my early 20s and I'd started hanging out with a group of people that partied pretty hard. They did all sorts of drugs that I shall not mention here. I did my best to keep away from that stuff, but I may or may not have joined in a few times. My life was a bit of a mess at the time. I won't make too many excuses about why I was hanging out with these people, but one of the reasons I stuck around for so long was this girl. At the time, she was exactly my type. She had long hair and she was playful and flirty. She was pretty much my dream girl. We got chatting and I asked her to hang out sometime and she actually agreed. I couldn't believe it. A few days before she was supposed to come and chill, she messaged me asking if I had any of that good green stuff. I didn't smoke on my own, only in social situations that made it a necessity. But instead of saying this, I just lied and said of course I have some. Suddenly, I'm panicking, contacting everyone I know about getting some grass. Nobody could help, and I was desperate. So, I did the dumbest thing I could think of. I went to the dark web. I got myself a virtual private network to stay anonymous and went searching for a way in. After a bit of digging and asking around, I found a link that supposedly led to a dark web marketplace. My heart was pounding as I clicked on that link. The website had a sketchy vibe, and it was like nothing I'd ever seen on the regular web. No flashy ads, No social media links, just a simple page with a list of products. I went through the listings until I found what I wanted. I messaged the seller and worked out the details. Paying for it wasn't as easy as clicking one button like you can on Amazon. They wanted cryptocurrency, so I had to figure out how to get my hands on some. It was a bit of a headache and cost me $50 for something that should have cost about $20, but I managed to get it sorted. A few days later, a small package arrived. My heart was racing as I opened it. But instead of what I ordered, it was just some random junk. I had been scammed. Panic set in as I realized I was in way over my head. Soon after, I started getting threatening emails from an anonymous sender. They knew what I'd been up to and were demanding more money, or they'd expose my activities to the authorities. I was trapped in a twisted game of blackmail. Every knock on my door made me jump. I desperately tried to figure a way out of this mess. I was stuck in a dark web nightmare of my own making, and I couldn't see a way to escape it. Call me an idiot, because I really am, but I sent the anonymous blackmailers around $600 in total, about $100 every week. They just keep coming back and blackmailing me, and I kept paying until eventually I just said screw it and stopped sending them anything. I lived in complete fear for months afterwards, thinking that the FBI were going to break down my door and arrest me. Looking back, it was pretty ridiculous. Nobody cares about a guy buying a tiny amount of green stuff on the internet, but my head wasn't quite right. The worst part is that the girl I liked didn't even care. She came over and we had a great night and she didn't even ask about it. So, if there's a moral to the story, other than avoiding the dark web, I'd say don't do drugs just to impress someone. And don't send $600 to people blackmailing you over a misdemeanor. This is a pretty short story, but it's true, so I'll tell it exactly as it happened. At the time I was a 23-year-old man. I had a history of using the dark web, browsing random sites, ordering some stuff, never really had any issues. I will mention though, that I used literally no programs or filters to protect me. I just went in deep and assumed that my antivirus would protect me from any harm. Ladies, cover your ears for this next part. Unlike other young men, I would watch adult content, and one night when I was feeling particularly lonely, I found some videos that I wouldn't watch with my parents. I sat in front of my laptop and did my business. 2 nights later, I get an email. Weirdly, it said that it was sent by my own email address. I hadn't seen anything like that before. I click on it straight away and I can't describe the feeling that hit me. There was a video attached, and it was me, in my birthday suit, furiously playing rock, paper, scissors in my lap. You could see everything, including my face at some point in the video when I adjust my seat. So there was no denying who it was. The email listed a bunch of demands: go online and buy some Bitcoin or gift cards and send them to him. Or the video of me sending would be sent to my family. The blackmailer had the decency to list the names of my family members, just in case I thought he was bluffing. He gave me a time limit of 48 hours, and pointed out that he could see that I opened the email because he was in my computer, and threatened that if I contact the authorities or start searching about how to deal with this situation, that he would release it all. Call me crazy, but I thought about it for a few hours and decided my dignity was too expensive. I wasn't going to pay someone to hide the fact that I do something that almost every other adult in the world does. I called his bluff and got my friend over to help me clear any viruses from my laptop. He thinks he found how they access my webcam, but we couldn't be sure, so I always have it turned off on the settings, as well as putting a sticker over it. I messaged everyone on the list that he sent me, telling them that they might receive a video of me and explained the situation. They all just laughed and told me I was gross. The blackmail guy never did send the video as far as I know. But I learned my lesson about taking online privacy a bit more seriously. About 13 years ago, when I was 18 and had just gotten my first computer, I spent a lot of time exploring some pretty disturbing websites. It was different back then. There wasn't much stopping you from ending up on gore websites. It was quite common to be scrolling through forums and suddenly see a video of someone being beheaded or accidentally watching an execution. Admittedly, I sometimes went out of my way to watch this kind of stuff too. Morbid curiosity, I guess. So, as I ventured down the rabbit hole of the dark web one night, I came across a website that claimed to be an interactive adventure. I loved interactive adventure storybooks and thought a digital version could be even better. Upon entering the site, I was immediately struck by its unusual format. Instead of traditional storytelling choices, it presented a series of hyper-realistic photos showcasing various choices. The story started outside what looked like an abandoned factory. You always had two choices. The first one was pretty simple. You had to choose which door to go into. One door had a no entry sign on it, and the other had a big stop sign. I chose the second one because I figured that'd lead to the more interesting story. Each choice led to a set of photos that portrayed the consequences of your choice. For the first few clicks, it was just navigating the factory. There were all sorts of tools and creepy props all over the place. It looked like a slaughterhouse with what looked like body parts of pigs or some other animal hanging on hooks. The level of realism was shocking, especially back then when the public or some cheap website wouldn't have the funding to make such realistic scenes. The next image had a picture of the woman with her hands clearly chopped off, with only bleeding stumps remaining on her arms. I couldn't believe this game was free. It was so convincing. The two choices now were just save or end. I was not about to end my little journey here, so I clicked save. Again, the website took a few minutes to load and I sat patiently waiting for the next part of the story. I was so numb to gore and this kind of thing after spending enough time on the internet, so I wasn't particularly shocked at the bloody details, just in love with the creativity of this game. The page refreshed and it was an image of the woman again, but this time her hands were bandaged and she's staring right at the camera, absolute terror in her eyes. I thought it was weird that I didn't get to make a choice, but I assumed when you save the game it kinda does a soft reset so that people who made other choices would all lead to that part anyway. I'd played similar games before, so I knew that often, no matter which choices you make, the game will force you down the path it had planned anyway. Another choice appeared. Man or child. I was a sick little teenager, but I didn't want to see a child getting tortured, even if it was just a game, so I chose the man. A few minutes passed again and then a man appeared in the chair. This time I had the choice between a rope and a baseball bat. I chose the rope, wondering how creative they could get with something so simple. Once again, a short delay between the next image loading, and I maybe started to get a bit bored at this point, but I waited. The next page loaded. The man had the rope around his neck. He was stood on the chair and the rope was attached to a metal beam above. It was crazy how brutal this website was, but part of me loved the intensity. I'd hit another checkpoint asking to save or end. It was at that moment my mom knocked on my bedroom door and I panicked and quickly pressed end. The page went blank just as she walked in. This is where it got seriously creepy. I immediately felt my stomach turn and my heart drop. The picture had loaded. The man who'd been holding the camera the whole time was now looking into a mirror, dressed in some butcher overalls, covered in blood. Leaning against the mirror was the man with a broken neck, His face had some disturbingly realistic details, like his eyes bulging and his face seriously discolored. 2 female hands, standing upright on their stubs, were also sitting next to the mirror, both with their thumbs up. It was incredibly morbid, but that wasn't the worst part at all. The worst part was written on the mirror. My name. My address. My mind was racing. I was completely freaking out. I even turned my screen off as if that would do anything. Was this real? Did I just determine the fates of these people? What the hell was going on? How did they have my details? I felt sick. I turned the screen back on and saw the 2 choices. It said, continue, with yes or no as the options. I immediately clicked no. I was done. I was genuinely so scared. The page started loading again, this time quite a lot faster than usual. The new page was just a zoomed-in image of my name and address, with the option to continue being repeated back at me, this time with save or end as the options. Is that what save meant? Save the woman? And end? Did I choose to end the man? I was drenched in sweat at this point and really panicking. Was this a threat? I have to continue or they'll come for me. Am I choosing to save myself or end myself? I hated everything about this moment. I clicked end and immediately turned the computer off. As you can tell from the fact that I'm telling this story, they never came for me. We did move house a few weeks later for unrelated reasons, so maybe that's why. But I lived in complete fear for at least 3 years after this. Did I really do those things? Was it just a creative game with some clever tricks? It would explain the long loading pages. I don't like to think about it. Well, at least I didn't choose the child. Have you ever Googled yourself? A few months ago I was feeling curious and decided to do it out of sheer boredom. With a fairly rare name, I wasn't expecting much in the search results. Yet to my surprise, I stumbled upon a website that had my full name as its domain. Upon clicking the link, I found myself on a message board. The website owner's profile appeared oddly familiar, sharing my age and similar hobbies. Although the message board lacked any posts, I saved it in my favorites due to the intrigue. A month later, I returned to the site. This time it boasted more content featuring diary entries that seemed ordinary at first glance. Notes like the weather was nice today or I'm so bored at work. Yet as time passed, I began noticing an array of coincidences. The owner lived in my city, which struck me as quite a coincidence given the rarity of our shared name. As I delved deeper, I found the diary's contents eerily mirroring my life experiences. One day it mentioned attending the same baseball game I had gone to. At first I dismissed it as a simple chance occurrence given the popularity of the local team. However, the coincidences persisted and became unsettlingly precise. Their pet dog's name matched mine from childhood, and even their favorite restaurant was the same one I frequented during my previous job. One particular day, the message board was filled with birthday wishes for the owner. Oddly enough, it was my birthday as well. Intrigued, I decided to leave a message for the owner, mentioning our shared name and extending a birthday greeting. However, to my surprise, there was no option to type a message. It appeared the message board was merely a static page. Puzzled, I reached out to the owner via email with a simple introduction. Hi there. Believe it or not, we share the same name, birthday, and we're in the same city. Nice to meet you. Just a friendly introduction. A few days later, I got curious again and tried showing the website to some buddies, thinking we'd all have a laugh about it. But guess what? The website was gone. Completely vanished. No trace. It wasn't even in my browsing history. That didn't sit well with me. Something felt off. I mean, it's like the whole thing was there one day and then poof, it just vanished into thin air. And then I got an email from my own email address. It just said, "Found you." Attached was a picture and I swear my heart stopped. It was me. Sitting at my computer. In my room. And here's the worst part. The angle of the shot was taken from the corner of my room where the window is. You have to climb this side of my house to get to this window. I zoomed in, squinting at every detail. The hairs on my neck stood up as I realized the angle of the picture didn't match up with the window. It was clearly taken from the very corner of my room where I usually keep my old chair piled with clothes. Someone had been inside. My mind raced. Who could have taken this? How did they get inside? I went through every possible explanation. A prank maybe? But the more I thought about it, the more that email and that picture made me feel like I was being watched. Stalked. I can admit I was freaked out. The whole thing went from curious to seriously messed up real quick. I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Monitored. The thought of someone sneaking around in my personal space snapping a picture while I was totally unaware. It's unsettling, to say the least. I've permanently locked all of my windows now, and I've got this weird paranoia about my room. Like, am I going crazy or was someone actually in here? One night I was scrolling aimlessly through social media, clicking on random links about the dark web and supposedly true stories about crazy encounters. Boredom can drive anyone to the weirdest corners of the web, and that's how I stumbled upon this bizarre post that grabbed my attention. It was an image of my front door. The caption, "Back where I belong," was written below it. I'm not the superstitious type, so I rolled my eyes and chalked it up to a creative attempt at freaking someone out. The next day, I couldn't resist mentioning it to my buddies. Their reactions were a mix of amusement and speculative theories about hidden cameras and creepy stalkers. They laughed it off and I joined in. After all, we're living in the age of tech, where a few clicks can pull up someone's life story, including the color of their socks on a specific day. Probably just some algorithm, I said, dismissing the weirdness. They probably got it from my IP address and Google Maps. They chuckled, teasing me about my lack of supernatural belief. I shrugged it off. It's not like I have anyone that would want to hurt me. But as the night progressed, the sense of being watched started gnawing at me. The shadows from the windows seemed to stretch a bit too far, and every creak of the floorboard sounded like a whisper. Ridiculous, right? A couple of days passed and I thought the unease had finally left me. Until an email from an unknown sender popped up in my inbox. The subject line was empty and the email had a single link. No text, just an ominous hyperlink. Curiosity and a little defiance propelled my finger to click the link. It opened a web page I'd never seen before with a weird combination of numbers and letters as its title. The screen displayed a live feed from my living room where I was sitting with my laptop. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, completely stunned as I saw myself from behind. Clearly there was a camera in my room, but where? Okay, now that's just messed up, I muttered, assuming it was a prank or someone playing with sophisticated tech tricks. But the camera panned around the room and my unease twisted tighter. My eyes darted around the familiar surroundings, trying to figure out where the camera was. That's when I noticed it. The angle was directly in line with the mirror that was mounted on the wall. My heart raced. I approached the mirror and tried looking at the laptop to see if my face was appearing on the live stream, but the website had turned into an error page. I spent some time trying to refresh the website and follow the link from the mail, but it was like it never existed. I checked the mirror again, and there was no obvious signs of there being a camera. I was exhausted after a long day, and I had quite a few drinks with my friends, so I told myself I was just being paranoid and went to bed. Days went by and I tried to forget the whole thing. Until one night, as I got up to grab some water in the middle of my sleep, I glanced at the mirror again. My reflection was normal, but something in the background wasn't. The edge of a shadowy figure peeked out from the corner of the mirror, a hint of a presence that shouldn't be there. I quickly turned around, heart racing, but there was nothing. The unease tightened its grip again. I need to chill out, I muttered to myself. It's all in my head. I blamed stress, lack of sleep, and the power of suggestion. But when I found my favorite mug smashed to pieces on the floor of my kitchen the next morning, I couldn't stop thinking that someone had been in my house. I was a believer in facts and logic, so when I heard the kitchen door creak open the next night, I didn't jump to supernatural conclusions. I thought it was an intruder. I tried the light switch, but it didn't work. It was practically pitch black. I grabbed my baseball bat and my phone and used its flashlight to investigate. I made my way towards the living room and looked around, aiming the flashlight all over, and suddenly I spot something. The mirror was leaning against the wall and there were obvious wires hanging out of it. I felt a strange mixture of anger and fear. Someone really was messing with me and they were here right now? I shouted, "Who the hell is in my house?" and turned towards the kitchen. But as I did, the light suddenly came on and blinded me. The world seemed to blur around me. My vision blurred, and then I woke up. I was back in my bed. I sat up, heart pounding. My bedroom was exactly the same as normal. Had it all been a dream? A really weird, vivid dream? I reached for my phone to check the time, and that's why I noticed the notification. An email had come in from an unknown sender. With trembling fingers, I opened it. It was a photograph. Almost the exact same photograph as the one that started this whole thing. It was my front door, but this time it was taken at night. The caption below the image sent shivers down my spine. "Sleep well. Goodbye for now." My eyes darted around the room, as if expecting someone to jump out at me. But I was alone. My logical mind tried to find a rational explanation. Maybe it was a prank, an elaborate scheme by someone with too much time on their hands. I rushed to my laptop and checked the sender's email address, but it was a jumble of letters and numbers, impossible to trace. I started to panic as I realized that this wasn't a joke. Someone was watching me, invading my privacy, and I had no idea who or why. I ran back into the living room to check the mirror. It was back on the wall in its usual place. I frantically clawed at it and ended up smashing it on the ground in an attempt to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. I felt like I was going insane, stood barefoot on my broken mirror, shuffling through the shards with my bare hands. The camera was gone. Or it was never there. What was I doing? I locked the front door, drew the curtains, and sat in the dimly lit room, my heart racing. I thought about going to the police, but what could he tell them? That I was receiving strange emails and photographs that seemed impossible to explain. The hours dragged on, and as the night grew darker, I felt my paranoia settling in. I didn't want to admit it, but the rational explanations were wearing thin. Was it really possible that someone was going this far out of their way to terrorize me? As I gazed at my laptop, its webcam staring back at me, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching. I closed the laptop and made my way back to bed. If they wanted to hurt me, they would have done it already, and I was exhausted from this whole ordeal. I accepted my fate and closed my eyes.